Avoid these deadly psychological traps. They can shape your decisions and behavior in ways you might not even realize. Have you ever wondered why you keep making the same mistakes or feeling stuck in certain situations? Today, we'll uncover these traps and how they trick your mind. We've spent countless hours researching and breaking down these complex psychological concepts into simple, actionable insights. Understanding these traps is super important. They can influence our decisions, our actions, and even our relationships. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of these traps and how to avoid them, making you more aware and in control of your choices. We'll be going through different psychological traps, explaining each one in simple terms. From the ostrich effect, where we ignore negative information, to the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we overestimate our own abilities. We'll cover them all, giving you tips on how to recognize and overcome these common pitfalls. Let's start with the ostrich effect. This is when you ignore negative information because it makes you anxious or uncomfortable. Imagine you have a stack of bills piling up, but you avoid looking at them. This doesn't make the bills go away. In fact, it usually makes things worse. To overcome the ostrich effect, face your problems head on. Deal with issues as they arise and take small steps to manage them. This will reduce your anxiety and help you stay on top of things. Next is the spotlight effect. This is when you feel like everyone is watching and judging you. For example, you might worry that everyone at the gym is staring at you. The truth is, most people are too focused on their own lives to notice. Understanding this can help reduce your anxiety. Remember, people aren't paying as much attention to you as you think, so relax, be yourself, and enjoy the moment. The halo effect is when your impression of one trait influences your overall perception of someone or something. For instance, if someone is good looking, you might also assume they are kind and intelligent. This can lead to biased judgments. To avoid the halo effect, try to evaluate each trait or quality independently. This will help you make more accurate and fair assessments. The contrast effect happens when you value something more because you've seen something worse. For example, if you see a very expensive car, a moderately priced car might seem like a great deal, even if it's still expensive. This can skew your judgment. To combat this, evaluate things on their own merits without comparing them to extremes. This will help you make more balanced decisions. We've just covered some of the most common perception and awareness traps: the ostrich effect, spotlight effect, halo effect, and contrast effect. By understanding these traps, you can start to recognize when they're influencing your thoughts and actions. Now, let's move on to decision-making traps and learn how they impact our choices. First up in decision-making traps is the inability to close doors. This is the fear of missing out, or FOMO. You might find yourself doing multiple things at once, afraid to commit to just one because you don't want to miss other opportunities. This can lead to stress and inefficiency. To overcome this trap, focus on one thing at a time. Prioritize your tasks and commit to completing them one by one. You'll be more productive and less stressed. Next is the paradox of choices. This happens when you have so many options that you can't make a decision. For example, standing in front of 50 different ice cream flavors can be overwhelming. Too many choices can lead to decision paralysis. To combat this, simplify your options. Narrow down your choices to a few key ones. This makes it easier to decide and reduces stress. The framing effect is when the way information is presented affects your decisions. For example, a product that's described as 90% fat-free sounds better than one that's 10% fat. Both mean the same thing, but the framing influences your perception. To avoid this trap, try to see the information from different angles. Look at the facts without being swayed by how they're presented. The anchoring effect happens when the first piece of information you receive becomes the reference point for all future decisions. For instance, if the first house you see is very expensive, all other houses might seem cheaper, even if they're still pricey. To overcome this, evaluate each option independently. Don't let the first piece of information dictate your judgment. We've just covered some key decision-making traps: the inability to close doors, paradox of choices, framing effect, and anchoring effect. Recognizing these traps can help you make better, more informed decisions. Next, let's move on to self-perception traps and see how they influence the way we see ourselves. First, let's talk about self-serving bias. This is when you take credit for your successes, but blame external factors for your failures. For example, if you get a promotion, you might attribute it to your hard work. But if you make a mistake, you might blame it on bad luck or someone else. To overcome this trap, practice taking responsibility for both your successes and failures. Acknowledge your role in outcomes and learn from your mistakes. Next is the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is when people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. On the flip side, those who are highly skilled often underestimate their abilities. To avoid this trap, seek feedback from others and be open to learning. Recognize that there's always room for improvement, no matter how skilled you are. The Pygmalion effect is when higher expectations lead to better performance. If you believe in your potential and set high goals, you're more likely to achieve them. Conversely, low expectations can lead to poorer performance. Set realistic yet challenging goals for yourself and believe in your ability to meet them. This positive mindset can enhance your performance. The end of history. Illusion is the belief that who you are now is who you will always be. You might think you've reached your final form, but in reality, people change and grow throughout their lives. Embrace change and be open to personal growth. This mindset will help you adapt to new situations and continue improving yourself. We've covered some important self-perception traps: self-serving bias, Dunning-Kruger effect, Pygmalion effect, and end of history illusion. Understanding these traps can help you develop a more accurate and positive self-image. Now let's move on to social influence traps and see how the people around us can impact our decisions and behavior. First up in social influence traps is the bandwagon effect. This is the tendency to follow the crowd. If everyone around you is doing something, you're more likely to do it too, even if it's not the best choice for you. For example, you might buy a trendy product just because it's popular, not because you need it. To overcome this trap, focus on your own needs and values. Make decisions based on what's right for you, not just what everyone else is doing. Next is reciprocity. This is when you feel obligated to return a favor. If someone gives you a gift or does you a favor, you might feel pressured to reciprocate, even if it's inconvenient. While it's nice to be kind and grateful, don't let this sense of obligation control you. It's okay to say no, or to return a favor when it's truly convenient for you. The unity principle is when you trust someone more just because they're from the same group as you, such as the same state, culture, or background. While it's natural to feel a connection with people who are similar to you, this can lead to biased decisions. Evaluate people based on their individual merits rather than just their group affiliation. This will help you make fairer and more accurate judgments. The bystander effect is when people are less likely to help someone in need if there are others around. You might assume someone else will step in, so you do nothing. This can lead to no one helping at all. To overcome this, take responsibility and act when you see someone in need. Be specific when asking for help and don't assume someone else will do it. We've just covered some critical social influence traps: the bandwagon effect, reciprocity, unity principle, and bystander effect. Recognizing these traps can help you make more independent and responsible decisions. Now let's move on to cognitive and emotional traps and see how they affect our thinking and emotions. First up in cognitive and emotional traps is negativity bias. This is when you focus more on negative aspects than positive ones. For example, you might receive 10 compliments but dwell on the one criticism. This can skew your perception and make you feel worse than necessary. To overcome this, make a conscious effort to look for the positives in situations and people. Practice gratitude and remind yourself of the good things regularly. The sunk cost fallacy is continuing with something just because you've already invested time, money, or effort into it. For instance, you might stay in a bad relationship or job because you've been in it for years. This can lead to wasting more resources on something that isn't beneficial. To avoid this trap, focus on future benefits rather than past investments. Ask yourself if continuing is really the best choice for your future. Action bias is the impulse to act hastily without sufficient information or preparation. You might feel the need to do something, anything, rather than wait and think things through. This can lead to poor decisions and unnecessary actions. To combat this, practice patience and take the time to gather information before acting. Sometimes waiting and thinking things through is the best course of action. The curse of knowledge is assuming that others know what you know. This can lead to misunderstandings because you might not explain things clearly enough. For example, an expert might explain something too quickly for a beginner to understand. To avoid this, put yourself in the other person's shoes and communicate clearly. Check for understanding and be patient in your explanations. The illusion of averages is believing that average numbers reveal the whole truth. For example, if the average income in a city is high, you might think everyone is well off, ignoring those who are struggling. This can lead to a skewed perception of reality. To overcome this, dig deeper into the data and consider the full range of experiences, not just the average. The endowment effect is when you value something more simply because you own it. For instance, you might think your car is worth more than similar cars because it's yours. This can lead to biased decisions. To combat this, try to view things from an outsider's perspective and assess their true value objectively. Understanding these traps can help you think more clearly and make better decisions. Remember, everyone falls into these traps at some point. The key is to be aware of them and to take steps to avoid them. You have the power to take control of your mind and your decisions. By understanding and avoiding these psychological traps, you can lead a more mindful and intentional life. If you're interested in learning more about personal growth, check out my other video on how to rewire your brain for faster and more effective personal growth. It will provide you with powerful techniques to reshape your thinking patterns and unlock your true potential.